I want to start this review with the following question. Can a game be too short or too long? Don't worry if you don't know the answer because nobody really does. For me, it's summarized in the following statements. A game is too long when gameplay mechanics are introduced and repeated several times without changing up the mechanics application, stretching the game's length unnecessarily and leaving the player with an unsatisfactory feeling after the game has been finished. An example here would be Akane from Ludic Studios. It's still a good game, but it is definitely too long. Review in the description, by the way. A game is too short when gameplay mechanics are introduced and after the first application the game is already over without any variation on the initial gameplay mechanics, leaving the player with an unsatisfactory feeling after the game has been finished. An example here would be Backland by B-Cubed Labs. And Backland is the game we're talking about today. What a coincidence. I have to warn you that the game is a 2-week project and more akin to a prototype, so every criticism I will make has to be seen through the lens of a development time of 2 weeks. But since the game costs money, I'm going to treat this as a finished product that should adhere to certain standards. I, as you probably know, have a focus on menus, and this game's menu kind of disappoints me. The menu consists of continue, restart, invert camera axis, and exit. It seems complete, but do I have to point out what is missing here? Well, the options, of course. All the options. This kind of makes sense once you take in consideration that it is a 2-week project, but once you want money for your project, I expect the base options like volumes and window modes plus resolutions in your game. Quick intermission here, I never understood the inversion of camera axis. If I push my mouse or analog stick upwards, I want to look upwards, not downwards. From my understanding, some vehicles like helicopters and jets control better with inverted controls, but this game doesn't have any vehicles, so why is it even a feature? Anyway, the menu is lacking almost everything, so I'm not going to talk about it that much, but if the developer wants to improve, here are the things they should add. Volume sliders with master volume, music volume, and effects volume. Graphics options with window, borderless, and full screen mode. A resolution that affects window size, doesn't matter if the game is sprite based or not. And if you want to go all out, a pre-launcher. So, after the initial message tells you to get off your ass and go look for some beacons, you are released on a barren world with acid rain and security droids. Your job is to find 5 beacons and activate them. How do you do that? Well, you see, you have a battery backpack that shows you how much energy you have left, which is a genius implementation of a non-intrusive HUD, by the way. Dead Space did that years ago, and I really don't know why games don't implement that more often. So, after wandering around and finding a beacon, what do? Well, you stand beside it, and your battery will be drained. It will take around half your battery to activate the beacon, and once it's activated, a bright beam will shine towards the stars. Sounds easy, right? Yeah, and fairly speaking it is. The game tries to stop you by putting security drones in your way that will shoot you on sight, but they aren't really effective. The game also tries to mitigate that by draining your energy when you're running, but there's so many battery packs lying on the ground that none of this really matters. The other way the game tries to hinder your progress is by activating acid rain periodically that will drain your energy should raindrops hit you. As you might have noticed from the footage in the background, there are some buildings lying around, and they are most likely devastated skyscrapers, but I really don't care. Most of them have a few levels, and as you can guess, they provide you with cover from the acid rain, making acid rain pretty pointless. As I mentioned before, the game is really not that difficult, and you can probably finish it in a few minutes. So what happens once you activate all the 5 beacons? Well, a black screen appears, and it tells you that you have been saved. Yep, no second level, no cutscenes, not even an end credit. The game just restarts. So here's the thing, I still like this game because it has one unique selling point. It looks fucking great. I love this art style and I would love to see more of that. And here's where we have to talk about value. So the game costs $5 and I would say for the looks alone the game costs $5, but I wouldn't recommend it. I certainly bought it because it just looks good. And to be honest, the game is more of a concept. It's more of like the starting off point, like I said, a prototype, and that's basically it. Another oddity the game has is that it's tagged with action, stealth, and exploration. But none of those things are actually in the game. There are no stealth mechanics like ducking or hiding. There are no mechanics that could be considered actions. There's not even an action button. And there's certainly no exploration, even though it could be with some hidden statue or something, but I never found one. And there are reasons for that. One of those being that it's only 2 weeks in development. But I also got the developer to talk about it, so let's hear it from him. First question I always like to ask the people is to introduce themselves. Tell the people who they are, what they do. Maybe sell yourself a little bit, Don't sell yourself short.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, so my name's Alex, and I'm just a solo indie game developer. Pretty much jumped into indie game dev about 4 or 5 years ago and learned with Game Maker, which is a 2D program. Primarily, it can do some 3D. That being said, I made it for my first game. Took me about a year, and I mean, I thought it was pretty cool when I made it, but then obviously now in reflection, it wasn't very good, but it was a huge learning process. And looking back at it, it really taught me about game design, what I did wrong, what I did right. And I really didn't have any followers on Twitter, and this was back when Steam Greenlight was still a thing, and it got through Greenlight, so I thought it was going to be really really good, and people were going to like it because they had voted for it on Greenlight. Obviously, then Greenlight went away, but they had still let the game through so it could be published. This was before Steam changed to allowing people to pay to put their games up. So I was kind of in this weird window between paying for the game to go up, and I got approved on Greenlight. So I finished the game. Took me about a little bit over a year. Put it up and did not sell well. And
so Backland was not your first game?
That's correct. Yeah. No, okay. I've been like, if you look through my Twitter profile, you'll see like probably 100 prototypes.
Oh,
and
okay. Yeah, I've seen the new one. It looks interesting. I thought it was like an exploration game, something like that.
Yeah, obviously, one of the things with indie game dev is you find yourself getting involved in making a project that's bigger than you'll ever be able to finish.
Yeah.
So I've pretty much been on that journey for 3 years now, where I start a project, I can kind of get the art good, and I get the gameplay mechanics good, and then I realize the scope of this project is ginormous, and I'm not going to be able to finish it. So really what I've been learning this year is focusing on the core gameplay mechanics and then taking the time to flesh out the whole game in some sense. So what happened was with the first game I made, which is on Steam, it's a 2D side scroller. I had this big plan for it, and then I was like, I got to get this thing finished. And basically, what I'm saying is like that showed me that just because you spend a year on a project doesn't mean it's going to be a success. And the value of user beta testing is everything. So really, where I'm at right now is looking for that project that strikes a chord with people on social media.
Yeah.
Even though that's not everything, but if your project doesn't get, I would say minimum, a decent amount of interest, it is the reality that once you publish it, it's not going to take off.
Yep.
So that's not to say you should give up on a project just because the first post you made about it doesn't get 1,000 likes. If you get a little bit of interest, try and iterate on it and iterate and iterate. But if eventually there's absolutely no interest gaining in a project, what I've learned is it's time to not do that project anymore. But that being said, maybe getting back to who I am. So started learning game development, no background in it. And I've just been going forward since then. I moved from 2D to 3D, which has been a huge learning curve, but well worth it because, in my opinion, the 2D market is way too saturated. And on top of that, in 3D, you have so many more options with your gameplay. So it's really allowed me to do gameplay mechanics that people aren't doing, or that not very many people are doing, so that can kind of give me a window to actually have interest in my projects.
Yeah, I can only agree with that because I have another big project looking at Steam Early Access titles, and there's a high amount of 2D platformers, and I would say most of them will never get finished because they didn't get any traction. And yeah, it's oversaturated, to be honest. It's the 2D market. The 2D platform market is definitely oversaturated.
Yeah, I think if you get into how to make a game, understanding how to make a player move and understanding a 3D space, we're talking the X coordinate, X plane, Y plane, Z plane.
Mm-hmm.
It almost seems fundamental to me that you actually do start with 2D
Yeah.
because 2D as a learning will show you, it'll start to build the mechanics in your head of how to build a game. And jumping into 3D off the bat, if you don't have any background or education in it, I think you'll just get swamped.
Yep.
But that being said, so 2D is great for learning, but it is the unfortunate reality that there are tutorials online on how to make every type of 2D game, which means with enough time, anybody can make those games.
Yep, probably. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't going directly to the Backland, the game Backland, which is the review about. I was impressed with the graphics. Like, that's the only reason I
Yes.
bought it, because it's like, this looks actually good. I like this art style. So I bought it. I played it. And a few questions open up. Like the tags on the itch.io side is like stealth, exploration, and action. So I could not connect this game with any of those titles, any of those tags. Could you explain what was the initial idea for Backland?
Sure. So getting back to kind of what I've been doing with prototyping and learning the scope of projects, really there's two things that are going on which led to Backland, which is I set a goal for myself to make a game in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you'll see a lot of game jam games that are made over a weekend. So I was saying to myself, what can I make in 2 weeks? And part of that was, can I actually make a game in 2 weeks that is more than what you would see in a game jam game? And can I make a game in 2 weeks that would generate some money? Because as much as I love doing game dev, we all need to make some money.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've been doing this for 4 or 5 years, and I haven't made that much money. And part of that is my scope problem, which is I get projects that are so big, I never finish them, which means they never get released, which means I never make money.
Mm-hmm.
So my thought process with Backland was, can I build something decent in 2 weeks and generate a little bit of money just to prove that you can make anything amount of money with game dev? And what ended up happening was I did prove that to myself. I think I'm pretty happy with what I was able to do in 2 weeks. And I think when I've seen some people comment on it, like, this is amazing, you did this in 2 weeks, there needs to be an understanding that 2 weeks is actually from a foundation of 4 years
Mm-hmm.
of learning what's good, what's bad to do as far as a project scope, learning what things you just need to give up on in a project, and to learn to really laser sight how to make a project.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. And it was hard. Towards the end of the 2 weeks, I was like, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do this, or it's going to be garbage. In the last, I'd say 3 days, the art style, the colors, and the gameplay mechanics just came together.
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to do an extra 2 weeks on it, but I cut myself off because I'm like, I just need to see what I can do in 2 weeks.
Yeah. One of the things that now they're explaining how it was done in 2 weeks. One of the things that I noticed was like for the gameplay mechanic itself, which is like turning off the beams and trying to avoid combat, avoid the sentry drones. It felt like too short. I felt a little bit unsatisfied. That was the end of my impression. But now they're mentioning, oh, this was done as a test. I can definitely see that, because I can see this idea being turned into something like, hey, this is the first level, and now you have, I don't know, a platforming segment. And now you have an extended stealth system in which you can actually, I don't know, duck or throw some items on the ground. Something like that, like the idea can be...
Oh, sure. I'd love...
No, please.
Yeah, I'd love to expand on it. I would have loved to have done more. My where I got the idea from was basically, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I was thinking, what would Rain World...
Mm-hmm.
That was my
I think you have to repeat.
So
You have to repeat the whole thing. So his inspiration was what?
Rain World, which
Yeah.
is a 2D game, and I was thinking, what would that look like in 3D?
Mhm.
And obviously, I have very few mechanics in Backland,
Mhm.
but I could flesh them out to more like Rain World, but in a 3D environment. I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like that. I think the unique selling point of the whole thing is it looks amazing, and a lot of people are turned off by this kind of pixelated or pixel art in 3D, and like, I just love it. It's great, and to get a thing in such a way that it's not jarring to the eyes, it's not hurting my eyes because it's pixelated. That's art for itself. I think that was very
Thank
well.
you.
That was very well done.
Very well done. So I kind of coming from the 2D game dev, I really liked pixel art, but then as we talked about, that market is so saturated.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, how can I bring 2D into 3D? Because one of the things I did not like about 2D game development is that I have to draw every single frame of everything
Mm-hmm.
if you had anything that rotated. So I was like, can I replicate something in 3D such that I don't have to draw every frame of a rotated object? So then I figured out this technique, and it really, I think I was the first one to do it. If you look back at the time frame of November of 2018,
Mm-hmm.
is when I put up my first projects that have this look. And there were some copycats like very soon afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying anybody stole my idea. Obviously, you put something out there, people are going to attempt to do it themselves.
Of course.
And but I was really happy that I was able to do that. And I as far as I know, no one's really attempted to make a 3D game, not just like replicating like a top-down game with pixel art graphics, but a true 3D cameraed game, a third-person game with that style is very tricky, and you don't see many people doing it. I've seen some developers who started to do it, and they have released how they did it. But it's still like you said, you still have to really think. You can't just take any game and make it look like that.
Yeah. The only game that goes in that direction that I'm trying to finish right now is Bunker Punks, but Bunker Punks is clearly a flat, it's like a flat line. You have flat characters that are not fully 3D animated, so you have like a paper style kind of thing. You understand what I mean? Like it's a flat character, and if it turns, it always looks at your character.
What's the name of that?
Bunker Punks.
How do you spell that?
Like a bunker, like when you want to save yourself from bombs, and then punks. BUKIR and then PUKS. Bunker Punks. Yeah, so that's the only game. The one of the things that I noticed about the game was that you have an invert epsilon axis or epsilon axis.
Yes.
And I never understood why it is done in games in general. And in this game, I was even more. I questioned even more, like, why is this done? Can you explain why you have like a inversion of the epsilon axis?
Yeah. So apparently that's like a huge thing, actually. Some people, their brains think pushing up on the mouse should make the camera tilt down. Some think pushing up on the mouse should make the camera tilt up.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get into that a lot with flight simulators as well.
Yeah.
And I released it one way and got 10 comments that they wish they could invert the axis on the camera.
Mm-hmm.
I quickly patched it, and everybody's been happy since.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I understand that in flighting sims you have the other way around, which I also prefer because driving a flight vehicle by pushing up and going up is very disturbing. You have to get used to it. It's more natural to push back or pull, and then the thing goes up. But as a general camera control, it's so weird for me because if I press up, I want to go up. If I press down, I want to look down.
Yeah. I agree, and it wasn't that hard to implement, but I was pretty shocked at how many people wanted it implemented. But that's why I did it, because people had requested it.
That's so weird. That's really weird.
Yeah, I get it. I don't need it inverted, but I get why people need it inverted. That's
Yeah.
just the way their brains work.
So since we're already talking about options, one of my pet peeves with, especially with indie games, is options in general. And I noticed that options are mostly missing. And I know a lot of people point out that you can, with Alt Enter, you can you can minimize the game and then make your own border size. But I prefer if games have like something like an options menu with like graphics options and then window size and so on. So most of the times, it's very difficult to implement. Has this been excluded from the game because it would take another 2 days or 3 days to implement, or was it like a choice you didn't even think about it?
Yeah, so everything with Backland comes down to there wasn't enough time in my 2 weeks. That being said, the reason why that's not even in games that people have been working on for 6 months and that they call complete is it's difficult.
Yeah.
Anytime there's a graphics change option, people have to figure out, does the game need to get reset? How do I make the engine do that? So a lot of times people, and then I mean level of detail changes as well. You have to program certain meshes to be lower poly with level of detail stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a whole, I mean, that's a huge time sink to make that kind of option in the game. And then you get down to the fact too that when you're talking about a game menu, it's actually super complicated compared to making an object move or rotate, because when you start dealing with a menu, you're talking about your options being saved and your options being loaded. And how do you lay out a menu? You start getting into arrays and you have to start getting into switches to make sure that the UI is over the right thing. So it's actually very complicated.
And you have to then save, of course, the files during runtime, and during runtime you have to load the file again so it loads correctly and so on. Yeah, I understand.
Exactly.
I actually do understand. I have like a little bit of background in commercial program.
Yeah, and it's not fun, right? So like we want to
No.
focus on making a waterfall, but who wants to focus on making an option?
Yeah, it's a personal pet peeve of mine that that indie games have that, because I think it's a part of your game. A menu is part of the game, and oftentimes it's forgotten. And sometimes people even forget to put an exit button in. Like that's not
I
good.
don't get that. If you're gonna like options of quality, like level of detail, graphic settings, very hard. Options of saving camera preferences, that's hard. But making a quick menu that just says quit is easy.
Nope.
So
there are games out there.
Yeah, that should be a no-brainer. And I've seen a lot of complaints on that, even with some of the sock pop games. And you could make a template and use that in every game.
Yeah.
No excuse.
Yeah, I agree. And I know menu and menu design is difficult, but I think it's an important part, because it's what is the player going to see when they first enter your game? The menu, of course. It's like this is your playing card. This is your your entry card.
Exactly. It sells the game initially. It really does.
Yep.
It will make people like, oh, this looks cool. Then that means the game I'm about to play must be cool.
Yep.
And if I ever have a project that is big in scope, I will have a fully fleshed out menu that I take 2 weeks making, and I will save that as a template that I can use going forward. But right now, I don't have a project big enough that I've done.
Oh, okay, I understand why it was done. I mean, still, I will still criticize this, because I think it's like my personal pet peeve. That's what my one thing that I will never accept a game not having.
Oh, totally. And Backland does have an exit, though.
Yes, that's I noticed. Like, I'm okay with that. Like, this is perfect. It's fine. The most basic stuff is there, which is better than most games. I have to say.
Yeah, and I have the option to invert the camera.
Yes.
And restart.
I still don't understand why, but since you mentioned it, some people like it inverted for some reason, which is odd to me. But I guess we have different preferences. I mean, some people can use they can use 2 fingers on the back buttons of controllers, and I'm like, I can only use one finger. Like, some people use both, but at the
interesting.
And I'm like, I can't use that. That's so weird to me, using both fingers, but they can for some reason. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So I definitely understand why personal preferences. That's why I say settings are so important, because people will have different preferences. So for example, if I'm recording a game, I want to have the game on the one side and then something else on the other side to keep track on what I'm notes or something like that. And when I don't have the option to minimize the window, I'm like, please just give me a window mode. And that's my problem always with that. Yeah. I think we are through almost. The last questions I always like to ask is, I think we already talked a little bit about it. If you have for anyone just starting out right now as an indie developer, do you have any advice?
Yes, and I think it's pretty huge.
Just
probably
go
like,
for
let me
it.
see if I can top 3 things.
Just go for it.
Okay, you're first starting out, your first at least 1 to 3 games are not going to be a success. Get them done, get them out as fast as possible and learn from them, then plan. Now you know what happens when you release a game and how hard it is and what didn't work on social media. Now you know why players didn't like this or that in those gameplay mechanics, and you can take those 3 games you've built and released, and then you can work on that game that you have always wanted to make. And on top of that, get on social media, put your stuff out. If you're working on a project, post on it multiple times a day, or multiple times a week, sorry, and use hashtags. And if your game is much as cool as you think it is, if you're looking for a successful project as far as success in how many people play it and financial success, if your game, I'd say 3 months top, is not gaining traction on Twitter, Reddit, somewhere, if you're not getting a decent amount of likes and follows, you gotta have to give up on that project. If you're looking for that project to be more than just something for your portfolio, if you're looking for a successful project financially and the amount of people that like it and play it, social media is the key. And I can speak from experience because I've released games that nobody on Twitter was really liking it and following it and commenting about it. And when those games got put out, they just fell to the wayside. Like you said, the 20 games coming out on Steam, those are games that nobody knows about. So when if you're making a game at the beginning, or you dive in right off the bat with that big project you've always wanted to do, if it's not gaining traction, either drop that project or change it up. Ask people what should be changed so you can change it and get people's interest, because if you don't, you are going to end up. I've seen it before. You're going to end up disappointed, financially disappointed, which can be a huge problem with people. But then there's another problem. Relationships can get hurt because you dive so much of your life into this project that you think in a year or two is going to pay out, or a year or two is going to prove to everybody that you're a good indie game dev and maybe you can get a job with that. But you're always sacrificing something, and do not sacrifice your relationships so that you can focus on your game, especially if it hasn't been proven on social media that people are interested in it, because you're sacrificing relationships for a project that's going nowhere. And I don't mean to be cold about that, but it's a lesson I've learned, and I hate to see people make that mistake, because work, anything, isn't as important as relationships. And it's really easy to get tunnel vision and just chase this dream, and it needs to be balanced, and you need to be able to know when to give up on a project. And that means you can start another project. Doesn't mean you have to stop game dev, but you just got to know what you're putting your time into is worth it in the end.
All right. Wow. I think that was one of the best advice I've heard. Like learning to give up.
I was gonna say, I've been on this journey now for 4 years, and I see people making the mistakes I've made, and these aren't like little things. This is like major parts of your life committed to these projects, and I just hate to see it repeated.
Okay, all right. That was actually I might clip that and post all of that. That's great. All right. The last thing, I always give the guests the opportunity to shill the shit out of their stuff. You know, say everything you want. Sell your games if you want. Just tell the world what should they do after they listen to this.
Cool. Yeah. So you can check me out on Twitter at B, the letter B, cubed Labs. And you can follow my projects, you can see all my prototypes, and hopefully the one I'm working on when you come visit my Twitter is the one that might be my big project that I commit to. Otherwise, you'll just see more of my prototypes. On my Twitter page is a link to bcubedlabs.itch.io, and I've got a couple projects up there you can check out. And obviously, as this interview is focusing on, I did release a game called Backland on itch that you can check out and play. And yeah, if you want to follow me on Twitter, leave comments, tell me what you think of my projects, what you think should get changed, or what you like, so I know the direction I'm going in. We'll make a project that I think will be good, and I think that's that is my thought process. Is I want to make something that people enjoy, maybe makes them think about some aspects of their life, or just an experience that makes them think. So thanks for this interview.
Thank you very much. And to everyone at home, thank you for watching as well.
Oh, I might have lost you.
Oh, yeah. For everyone at home, thank you for watching as well. And have a nice day. Bye bye. To keep up with the game's length, let's keep this short. The game is a starting off point for a bigger project with lackluster mechanics, way too easy gameplay, and amazing graphics. If you want to support the dev, buy it. But I can't recommend it. Alright. Thanks for watching. Watch my other stuff too. Subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. Do all the good stuff. Take care of yourselves and have a nice and wonderful, beautiful day.